All right. Well, we do have the next guest as we get Eugene's audio situation figured out. Free Eugene's voice. Let's get it going, guys. I want that trending. In the meantime, we want to welcome our next guest to the show, Layan Sima Fuleihan, the education director at the People's Forum and editor of 1804 Books. Layan, welcome to the Freedom Side.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so relieved we can hear you. It's good to see you, Layan. It's good to have you on. I think we're still working on Eugene's audio. Hopefully we can hear him at some point. But Layan, Israel's genocide has today's February 8th. So yesterday was exactly 4 months since this genocide began. We're literally entering the 5th month. We're at over 28,000 Palestinians killed, over 10,000 children. I believe something like 70,000 people have been injured. And we've seen recent diplomatic efforts by the US, Egypt, and the Qataris to try to push towards some sort of negotiated temporary halt, temporary ceasefire, leading to maybe something more permanent in the future. But so far, that proposal has failed in securing anything permanent. We know that, Hamas released its offer yesterday, giving conditions for basically ending the siege on Gaza. It actually was a very detailed ceasefire proposal. The Israelis have basically rejected it at this point. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts? What do you have to say about the viability of the various proposals on the table and what it means for the people of Gaza, for the people of Palestine?
He's back.
Well, I think we have to be very conscious of the fact that these negotiations are quite complex and that the media is playing a huge role in shaping the way that it's being communicated to those who are not at the negotiating table. If we actually look at the two proposals, the one that was hashed out in Paris between Israel, the US, Qatar, and Egypt, and then we look at Hamas's proposal in response, one, we can be very clear that the Paris proposal was an Israeli proposal, and it certainly was not a ceasefire proposal. If we look at the contents of it and what it was actually saying, it provided no mechanisms for actually establishing a ceasefire and ending the war. The Hamas proposal did lay out what those conditions would be. They specified some of the very vague gestures in the Paris proposal. They specified numbers of prisoners. They specified stages for the withdrawal of the Israeli army with the goal of full withdrawal from the occupied Gaza territory, and laid out conditions for moving from one phase to another. They both had 3 phases, but in Hamas's proposal, laid out the condition for moving from the first to the second phase being the completion of negotiations that would have a complete cessation of military operations on both sides. And so essentially, despite the way the narrative is, Israel is saying that Hamas is making ludicrous demands right now and that there's no way that they could even consider accepting any of them, when really the Paris proposal itself was simply not a ceasefire agreement. And what Hamas did was propose a ceasefire agreement. So we have to look at it in the actual content of what was being proposed on both sides. Israel is not willing, it seems that their position right now, at least publicly, is not willing to pause the military operations. They are threatening, and they've already been bombarding Rafah, where over 2 million people are seeking refuge. There's worldwide concern over this because if what we saw in the rest of the past 4 months wasn't horrific enough, now we have 2 million people who are displaced without the conditions necessary for survival, and bombardments being threatened on them as well. And in this context, Israel is backing away from even the negotiating table. So it's really a concerning situation.
Well, I don't know if you can hear me, Layan.
We can.
Yes.
Eugene's
Great.
voice has been freed. Thank goodness.
Thank you. It's hard to even really fathom. I mean, seeing the attacks on Rafah, one of the things that people have been talking about for some time now is, I don't even know why we're questioning this, whether or not the actual Israeli plan is to push all Palestinians who they don't kill out of Gaza. And I mean, it really feels like that is what they've reverted to by rejecting this ceasefire. And then, I mean, people can't go any further south at this point. So, I mean, it really does feel that, you know, there's the mask is totally off for anyone who couldn't see it yet, that this is an ethnic cleansing operation.
That's definitely true. I mean, they're insisting now that they achieve military victory over Hamas, something that has been proven that they've been unable to do. Their only military strategy at this point is to mass murder the entire population and to see if that's going to stop the military infrastructure of the resistance movement, which does not only include Hamas, and we also have to be very clear about that. They have failed. They have managed to kill tens of thousands of Palestinians, majority children and women and civilians, and they have damaged the majority of the infrastructure necessary for sustaining life in Gaza, and still have not been able to achieve a military victory over Hamas. So basically, Netanyahu is in a lose-lose situation, and he's choosing to go down with more bloodshed, just trying to hope. It seems, my interpretation of it is that he's hoping that he can enforce military might and kind of last the endurance battle here. But it really, it's a losing position. The majority of the world opinion is certainly against what has happened over the past 4 months, but even more against now moving into Rafah. U.S. officials are making statements saying they're extremely concerned that they will not back any military operation in Rafah unless there's safeguards for civilian protections. We've seen that before. We've seen that Blinken, was after the first round of humanitarian truce, kind of shifted his tone and was saying similar things. It led to no concrete withdrawal of support. It led to no actual. The U.S. has not actually used any of its political weight to limit or condition Israeli operations, even though they could. So I think we have to really take anything that Blinken says with a lot of salt, not just a grain of it. But you can see just in the way that he's speaking and the way that he's trying to at least give an image of prioritizing negotiations, that it's become a very unsustainable position to have, even for the United States. So, Israel's administration, Netanyahu, they're digging their heels in. They're about to commit now what is internationally accepted as continuing to commit genocide, and take it even to another level. So it's really a terrible situation, and mostly characterized by the unwillingness of the Israelis to negotiate. And I think that's extremely important. Most of the time when you hear people talk about, whether in the media or in intellectual spaces or in history spaces, about the history of negotiations between Israel and Palestine, the mainstream narrative, at least from the US, is that it's the Palestinians who refuse to negotiate. And I'm sure that this is what they're trying to twist this now by saying that Hamas is making unreasonable requests. It's really the Israelis who are completely unwilling to negotiate. They've made no actual proposal that would lead to any sort of ceasefire, and they're refusing to consider one that was brought to them.
Yeah, as far as I see it, the Israelis are genocidal. They would eliminate every single person in Gaza one way or another if they could, and they will continue to do what they're doing until they're stopped. And so it really does come down to pressure from the outside. There's no internal anything in Israel that will make this stop. I mean, the U.S. is obviously the most powerful force that can. There's also various groups in the region that are putting pressure on Israel, whether we're talking about Lebanon's Hezbollah or the Yemenis or the Iraqis. What's incredible about the U.S. position here is not only have they basically said, without saying it this way, but they're essentially saying, you can do whatever you want in Gaza. We literally won't, there's nothing we won't defend Israel doing in Gaza. But we want to keep it contained there. We want to keep it contained to Gaza. But you've got all these groups across the region saying over and over and over again, we're not going to stop firing at your bases, and we're not going to stop firing at the Israelis and stopping ships that are going to Israel until this genocide ends. And so it's like there's the bigger issue, or it becomes a more regional issue when we talk about the idea of escalation. And now we've reached a point where you have Biden bombing Iraq, bombing Syria, bombing Yemen. And of course, this entire time, there's been the potential for a massive escalation in Lebanon, which has already had a war in the south. The Israelis every day are threatening to go to Lebanon next, even today. They're prepared. So, Layan, what do you have to say about the risk of regional war here?
Well, for as much as it's exactly right the way you've laid it out, Rania, for as much as the way the U.S. would like to keep it contained, as they say, they are actually the main ones escalating. The U.S., in partnership with the U.K., has been bombing hundreds of sites now over the past week, more than that, in retaliation for what they're saying is the attack on Tower 22. We have to understand that there's been many attacks on U.S. bases over the past period and before that, because the people in the region from most factions and most portion sectors of society and across the political spectrum do not want the U.S. military presence there. I mean, I was listening to an interview with some people from the Council on Foreign Relations recently, and they openly admitted, Robin White openly admitted that if the U.S. leaves Syria, then the Syrian Democratic Forces who have control over the oil in Syria would not be able to keep control of it. And so, I mean, it's really, the U.S. is still there as a malicious force that is controlling the resources of the region, that is keeping a situation of political and military chaos going and not allowing for there to be a process that would actually resolve many of the issues that were caused by the various U.S. invasions in the region. And so military bases have been receiving a variety of different attacks, even though, of course, they are much more militarily superior, but have been receiving attacks. And what happened on Tower 22 was admitted by the U.S. media. It was a mistake on behalf of those who were monitoring the defense systems of that base, and they didn't realize what was coming. And so this attack did land and did cause loss of life. And so they're using it now to justify a huge escalation, over 100 bombings of various sites that has taken out also civilians across Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. And all the while trying to say that they are bombing discrete kind of these rebel forces, military infrastructure. They don't understand that, especially in places like Yemen, you cannot isolate the Ansar Allah movement from the masses of people in Yemen. They are actually representing a force, a mass force that is committed to real solidarity with the Palestinian cause. And it's not just isolated to one or the other group. And this movement itself is not actually a discrete political movement. It includes many different political people from different political organizations and identities. So it really is the U.S. that is escalating, because when you attack a people, then you get a response from the people. It is the United States that is United States and Israel that is pushing the conflict to go beyond the borders of the occupied Palestinian territories. And I think we have to be very alert to that. It's something that I think many people inside the White House administration don't want to deal with. It's distracting them from their larger goals, which is pivoting towards China, trying to maintain global hegemony in other spheres, and they're getting dragged down into the Arab region. But their words and actions are not lining up.
Briefly, before we let you go, Layan, how do you evaluate the state of the worldwide storm of protests we've seen against this genocide?
Well, they're still going very strong, despite what I think people maybe have hoped from the White House and the ruling class across the world. They had hoped that people would get kind of tired, that the news cycle would shift, that there would be demobilization. Here in the U.S., we've seen a wave of police repression on the very right to protest. In New York City, where I'm based, the police have basically come up and have decided that people do not have a right to protest anymore, not in anywhere, not have rallies, not use sound, not take the streets. But they're coming up against a force now, a organic force that is not only committed to the cause for Palestine and has decided to be in this for the long run, but has had the training of the past 4 months and is much more organized, knows how to organize protests, knows how to withstand different types of repression, whether it's media, whether it's political, whether it's police. And so the attempts, I think, to repress the movement for Palestine are not going to be successful. On top of it, the Democratic Party in particular has basically lost its base of support over this issue. Most Democratic Party officials who have not said something in favor of a ceasefire are now basically being followed around every single day by people who are making it very clear to them that they are supporters of genocide, that they are indicted, in fact, with supporting genocide, as long as they do not use their position in the White House to put pressure on the Biden administration and to push the United States to use its extreme influence to restrain the Israelis and to answer the demands of their own population. And it's also been very interesting. I just want to say one last thing is that, a lot of people were activated by this latest genocidal assault. But in the process, over these past 4 months, as people have built with each other and investigated more the situation, a lot of people have moved from simply just demanding a ceasefire to demanding an end of the Israeli occupation overall. And so I think that what has started since October, unfortunately for Biden and his friends, is here to stay in the long term beyond any version of a negotiated ceasefire, and until there is greater justice for the Palestinian people. So that is one very optimistic thing in the situation, and hopefully I believe will continue to strengthen as things move on and develop.
Fantastic. Well, Layan Fuleihan, Education Director at the People's Forum and editor at 1804 Books, as always, really appreciate you joining us here on The Freedom Side.
Thank you so much for having me.